He's like, hey, I got an extra bike. Do you want to come ride? And I was like, yeah, sure. I got some time on a Saturday. Let's go ride. And this guy is probably 4 inches shorter than me and I don't know, maybe 30 pounds lighter than me at the time. And so the bike he had, we had to put the seat all the way up and like didn't fit me at all, but I had no idea. And I didn't have shoes to clip into. And so we swapped the pedal out for just like, the pedals with the cages on them. And I'd go ride 20, 30 miles with him. And it was a lot of fun. I'd never ridden a road bike before. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And so kind of by the end of the summer, after I think we'd ran or biked together maybe a half dozen times, he's like, hey, there's an Olympic triathlon coming up. You should do it. And I'm like, no, I'd have to swim. And he's like, don't worry about it. You just get through the swim. There's no problem. Go, you can borrow this bike, this road bike I have. It'll be fine. And then you'll do fine on the run and it'll be fine. And I was like, okay, fine. It kind of, it really wasn't too hard to twist my arm.
That is Brandon Krout this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. What's up, people? So for those of you who are triathletes, when you think of a professional, you probably think of somebody who has all the gear, all the gadgets, the power meters, fancy trainers, and even like a big budget for their travel to races and such. And I want you to just imagine for 1 second, not only racing without those devices, because I'm sure many of you have them, but racing with the only metric is heart rate. So that's the only thing that you have to go off of, and the only time that you use it is on the bike. Does that seem impossible? Well, then imagine using only heart rate on the bike to race and qualifying for your professional license. Does that seem impossible? Well, that's the path that today's guest, Brandon Krout, took. And did I forget to mention that he was doing this all while going through medical school and raising 2 kids? So my name is Ian. This is my podcast. Welcome back if you are one of my loyal listeners. So Brandon Krout and I got connected through a mutual friend, Justin Mendoza, and I was really, really excited to chat with him. He came on a very high recommendation from Justin Mendoza, who is a former podcast guest, and so I knew that Justin was only going to send me amazing individuals to have on the podcast, and he did not let me down this time, for sure. I just couldn't wrap my head around qualifying for a pro card. Like I still can't wrap my head around that, and I can't wrap my head around going through medical school. I was never one for school. The classroom learning thing was just never really my gig to begin with. So I can't imagine going through medical school, and I can't imagine doing both of those things all at the same time. So you're going through med school and still managing to train at such a high level to qualify for your pro card. It's mind-boggling to me, and my hat goes off to Brandon. So Brandon, he started his triathlon journey kind of for fun and on the recommendation of a friend. And now he's racing as a professional at the absolute highest level. And this conversation that we have is a wide-ranging conversation hitting on Brandon's early days of running, and weaving through college and med school and kind of where he was in his running career all throughout that time. And Brandon also manages to drop some great tips and tricks about not only training, but how to manage the training while still trying to raise a family and be a dad and, somehow go through med school. So I really enjoyed this interview, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. So without further ado, here is my interview with Brandon Krout. Right, sweet. So this evening, I have the opportunity to connect with someone thanks to a previous guest on the podcast, Justin Mendoza, who was on in the very early days of the Do It For Yourself podcast, replied to one of my Instagram stories that I had put out there, and he highly, highly suggested that I reach out to today's guest and get connected with them and get their story about how they're doing it for themselves as not only a professional triathlete, but also as a medical doctor. So please welcome this evening Brandon Krout. Brandon, thanks so much for joining me.
No problem. This is really exciting.
So as I said, we got connected through Justin, and we were both just talking, and it's quite amazing. And I think this is one of the beauties of social media, but neither one of us have formally met Justin Mendoza, but it seems like he has, helped and connected not only the two of us, but he connected us with other people as well inside this sport. And it's all been through social media.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one thing that's really cool, I guess, about social media and triathlon or endurance sports in general is everybody's so friendly and eager to reach out and help each other. And like you said, I've never met Justin Mendoza. Who knows? He could be some girl that's like catfishing both of us. We have no idea. But it's a really helpful and friendly girl. So Justin Mendoza is an awesome guy. And, I think he has a racing page or a training page on Facebook as well. And so that's pretty beneficial to a lot of triathletes. I would check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope that he listens to this and he definitely hears that, because that would be really funny. So I want to touch on, a few little pieces of your story tonight as we're talking. And the first thing I want to talk about is I want to kind of get an idea of what your athletic background was, prior to coming into triathlon. So can you kind of give us a little bit of a background on what you were doing, through high school and college as far as athletics go?
Yeah. So growing up, I was a really active boy, like I think most American boys are. I always had to be playing sports kind of all year round. I even, sometimes would have sports that overlapped each other. And if that didn't happen and I was sitting around still, I was tormenting and pestering my siblings. And so my parents were always like, get out of the house, go play sports. And so I was always really active, loved it. Played soccer and basketball, baseball, all those things growing up. Went into high school and really wanting to focus on basketball. And in junior high, the cross country and track coach came to the junior high and kind of explained to everybody what cross country was. And I thought, yeah, right. That doesn't sound like fun, but it could be a good way to get in shape for basketball. So I guess I'll do it. And so I, went out my freshman year in the fall for cross country and kind of growing up, I was uber competitive and was fortunate enough to play like on older teams with older kids. And so I was used to kind of being competitive, starting as an underdog and kind of working my way up against older people. And so as soon as I started that freshman year of cross country, freshman team or JV wasn't going to be good enough for me. I had to go out and race the older guys and make the varsity team. And I remember my first day of practice, I went in basketball shoes and we had to do these hill repeats. And I just ran up them as hard as I could in these basketball shoes and beat all the other freshmen by a long shot, all the other sophomores, and was, keeping up with the juniors and seniors. And the assistant coach came over and said, you might want to think about getting some running shoes. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess so. And so, my mom went out and helped me get some running shoes. And from then on, if the varsity team was doing something, I didn't want to be left out. And so our first race, my coach was kind of timid and, well, not timid, cautious of us, not trying to burn us out or give us a bad experience. And so he put me and all the other freshmen in the freshman race, and we just killed it. Me and this other freshman on my team, we just killed all the other freshmen from the other schools at this big invitational and ended up like walking across the finish line because we were so far ahead. And my coach was running around like, these guys are animals. This is so exciting. And so from then my next race, he made us run freshman again. And I was winning that race. And you know how there's like a chute, a finish line chute with the flags and stuff. I didn't look exactly where the finish line ended, and so I was leading by a fairly good margin. And as soon as I got to the flags, I stopped because I thought the race was over. And then the guy a couple seconds later, the guy in second ran by me, and I was like, "Oh, the finish line's up there." And so I kind of jogged it in and got second. And so I was like, "Oh, I guess I should figure out where the finish line is first next time." And then from there, I was fortunate enough to race varsity for all the rest of my high school career. I ended up, playing JV basketball that freshman year, and then I played varsity soccer that freshman year as well. But kind of, didn't like the environment so much. I was the only freshman, and everybody else was junior and seniors. There weren't any sophomores. I didn't really like the environment that presented, and so the following year I decided to do track instead. But I was both track and cross country were really just to get in shape for basketball because that's what I really wanted to do and really enjoyed doing. When I was in 8th grade, I joined a men's league and would just get beat up, and have to sit out forever and try to earn my playing time. And it finally happened. And so that was just what I loved to do. And so, sophomore year was kind of coming around and I was getting a little bit better at cross country and track. And by the end of junior year, I kind of had to decide, because my main goal was to play sports in college. And I kind of had to decide, do I want to do basketball or do I want to run? And my running career was progressing much more than my basketball career. And so it was a very, very hard decision for me, but I decided to not play basketball. I made varsity my sophomore year. I was the starting point guard my junior year and walked away from it my senior year just to focus on running.
Now, I want to ask you a question right there. Do you think that your basketball was starting to suffer because of track and field and because you were having success there? Or was it just you wanted to get to the next level and so you needed to focus on one or the other?
A little bit of both. I think when you're in high school, kids should be playing multiple different sports. I think, it's better for them physically and you don't get burnt out mentally and things like that.
For sure.
But at the same time, there was also a combination of me not really fitting into the coach's system and kind of what my role was expected to be on the team and, not really getting highlighted like I needed to be to make it to the next level. Whereas with cross country and track, I was, it is a team sport, but I was really on my own. And so it was up to me to go and race and perform well and to put in the time practicing. Whereas, with basketball or other team sports, you're kind of relying on other people. And if other people are letting you down, then you don't progress as well type of thing. And a lot of that had to do with which coach believed that I could make it to the next level. And so what kind of emphasis they put on not only training and coaching, but also just me as an individual and as a person. And I felt that my running coach really cared about me as a person. And then, I could leave it up to myself because I didn't come from a powerhouse running school.
Okay.
In, my junior year, I made it to state and I was the only one on my team. And my senior year, I made it state. I was the only one on my team. And so, I'm the only one traveling. And in track was the same way. And I'm from Washington State, where long distance running is a big deal. And these, floppy haired white kids in short shorts were uber fast and setting the state, and the national time records. And so that just kind of fit me better. I didn't have a huge team to rely on and it was just me and I could go out and work. And so my junior year, I decided, okay, I'm going to walk away from basketball, focus on running because maybe I should run more in the winter as well instead of just playing basketball. so I can have a killer spring at track, and that way maybe some coaches will look at me and I can go to college. So it's kind of a mixture.
And so did you end up going on to run in college as well?
So I did. I started getting a lot of kind of West Coast offers and interest in mail and letter and things like that. And that was a lot of fun. And then one day I randomly got a letter from Brigham Young University, Hawaii. And I didn't even know there was a Brigham Young University, Hawaii. I was like, they have sports? Are you kidding me? And so I opened it up, and it was, we're interested in you. We'd love to offer you a scholarship. And so I went online and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks awesome. And so right then and there, I said, that's where I'm going that day. And so I didn't even, look at anything else. I was like, run it in Hawaii for BYU. That's what I want to do. And so that's what I decided on. And that happened the winter of my senior year. And so there's kind of like no pressure going into the track season. I knew where I was going. It was going to be a lot of fun, headed off to college. And so I was fortunate enough to do that and go to Hawaii for college. Fortunately, Brigham Young University of Hawaii does no longer have sports. They cut their sports program last year. But at the time, we were NCAA Division II in the Pacific West Conference. And something that I think a lot of people don't know, and I certainly didn't know, is there's 5 universities that are either Division I or Division II on the islands, plus a bunch of community colleges. And so we would have, in our conference, we had those universities that were out there, plus we had a lot of the California schools. And everybody wants to go out to Hawaii for an invitational. And so there was no shortage on, these mainland schools, Pepperdine and UCLA and all these other schools that would come out to race because it's Hawaii and who wouldn't want to race in Hawaii? Absolutely. And so it was fun. We had really good competition, and then our region, we'd go against Adams State and Chico State and Anchorage, Alaska. And so some really, heavy hitters. And so competition was pretty good. The cool part, though, was that it was like living in the Wild West as far as running goes, as far as facilities. And, we weren't one of the nicest schools as far as athletic facilities go. But, I mean, you'd start your run and you'd head off into the mountains of the North Shore. And you just run up all these trails up into these mountains. And there's just like wild boars running around and wild cattle. And you just be running around, and then you'd come down and finish your run on the beach, and there would be your coach waiting for you with a, giant cooler of Powerade, and you'd finish on the beach. And there's like no better way to run or train than that, because you're just training the mountains, training the humidity, and it was just awesome. And our long runs would be along the North Shore, by all like the big surfing beaches, Pipeline and Sunset Beach and Waimea. And so the scenery for running out there was just awesome. And it was just an awesome experience for 4 years of running and training and racing.
Now,
it's great.
Do you think that the running has stuck with you, and now running is one of your stronger legs of the race for a triathlon?
Yes and no. I think I put the least amount of time into running just because of that background. But after college, I wasn't an amazing runner. I was always our 4th or 5th guy on the team. I was never one of the front runners, but I was consistent. And so, you put in 4 years of running and training really hard, and that kind of sticks with you. And then when I took off to med school, I didn't run for a few years. I didn't do anything for a few years. And just got rather large and just, studied and stuff. But getting back into competing and back into running, that's been something that I've had to focus the least amount of time on. Am I the fastest out there? No, but I'm pretty consistent, and I can go out and run a consistent, good, solid pace without having to put in a ton of work during the week. So that's really nice.
So now when you started med school and you kind of quit running, was there any point in time that you missed it at all? Because I know, like I was telling you before we started, my brother's girlfriend is in med school right now. And I mean, I just saw her this past weekend, and she doesn't really have like a life outside of school. And I didn't realize this, but like where she's going to school, and, correct me if I'm wrong, if it was different for you, but for her, what happens is like yesterday she had class, and class was only from 10 to 12, and they're going over this like case, I think is what she called it. And so they go over it, but like all the learning and stuff is supposed to take place on your own time. So she spends like hours and hours and hours at the library studying and learning because that's all on her.
Yeah, and that's kind of sounds like the beginning, I guess, the first couple of years of med school. And that's how it was for me. It was, depending on the day, it was, class from 8 till 3, 2 or 3 with a lunch hour in between that. And then the rest was on your own. And so I remember when I was an undergrad, this is how terrible I was. I never, ever, ever studied on the weekend. Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, never. And Monday through Thursday, if I got 2 hours in the library, I felt like I was like the most studious kid ever. I thought I was just amazing. In high school, I guess I never really learned how to study, and I had so many other things I'd rather be doing than studying. And so when I got to med school, I was like, oh my gosh, this, maybe 2 hours a night deal is not going to work anymore. And so I went from, undergrad, kind of my normal schedule plus practice and being done with everything by 5, eating dinner, going to the library, being home by 8:30 or 9 and going to bed, to med school where I'm up at 7. And then it's basically, besides like a lunch break, it's basically all day classes and then a dinner break. And then I would go to bed after studying at like midnight. And so, there's just so much more information that you're responsible for, and it's complex information. And so, yeah, I can imagine what your sister or sister-in-law is going through. I went through that for the first couple of years of medical school. And that was the time where I didn't run. And yeah, I missed it. I'd be like, kind of daydreaming, like, oh, I wish I could go out and run. And at the same time, my wife, that's how we met. We both ran for the same team. And so she would go out and run. And I was like, man, that would be so fun. Or I just kind of missed the competitiveness of it as well. Trying to see how well I stacked up to other people and trying to race them and outthink them and outfox them and see what I could do. And so, yeah, I definitely missed that. But there were other priorities that I had to take care of for that time.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So now, along this kind of journey through med school, because I would have to imagine that it doesn't get any better, like as far as school goes, and then especially through residency, it does not get any better.
Yeah, and that depends on what program you go to and things like that. I was fortunate that after my first couple of years, then you kind of start more in hospital work, and every so often you'd get paired with a physician that had an easier schedule or maybe didn't demand or require so much from you as a student. And so you kind of have a little bit more leeway to have some free time. And so that happened a little bit. And that during that time, I was able to notice that, okay, I can bike more here, I can do this here. And so, or I'm going to be home earlier this evening so I can get a pretty solid workout in. Or I don't have for the next 6 weeks, I won't have anything to do on a Saturday. That's awesome. And so, you're able to kind of plan and get some decent training blocks in. So that's kind of what my med school morphed into a little bit.
Okay, so you actually had the opportunity to return to training while you were in your residency program.
Not yet. I haven't started residency actually.
Oh, okay. So you're in like later in your med school, but not quite in residency yet.
Yeah, I'm just in. Other medical doctors will understand. I've graduated med school, but I haven't started residency, and so as of 2 months ago. And so that I'm kind of in this no man's land of where I have more free time than normal than I've had for a long time.
Okay.
So that's where I'm sitting right now.
Okay, so you actually haven't gone through your residency yet.
No, not yet.
Okay, understood. All right, got it. So now you did mention something that I want to touch on there. You said that you got a little bit bigger. So what exactly did you mean by that? And if you mean that you had put on some weight, like, do you know how much you had put on?
Oh, well, this has happened to me twice. So after high school, I went to college and ran for a semester. and did that season. And then I actually left and went on a 2-year Mormon mission. And so during those 2 years, I ran one time. I just did the normal things that Mormon missionaries do. And so when I went back to college, I had gained a ton of weight. I actually came back to college at 210 pounds with terrible tan lines, because you wear pants every day and, white collared shirt every day. And like, you're in Hawaii and I stuck out like a sore thumb. And by the end of, and man, I hadn't run for 2 years. And so it was a struggle. I mean, I put on my old running clothes and I was like, oh, this is just not good. And by the end of that season, so halfway through August, September, October, beginning of November, I had gone from 210 pounds down to 155. Wow. And that was due to intense training and a lot of self-control at the dining hall. And so I had done that before, and I got myself back into shape in that season and came storming back and made all conference that season. And it was crazy. It was just a crazy dramatic shift. My wife, actually, we met that semester, and she put me in the friend zone real quick. And it wasn't until I lost all that weight that she finally decided to go on a date with me. Now, she denies that was the reason, but the timeline, there can't be a coincidence. And so, like, the end of the semester, I was walking around in like super baggy clothes, nothing fit me. And she was like, you got to fix that. And so I ended up having to do that, get some different clothes that fit. But yeah, I lost a ton of weight that way. So anyway, so med school starts, and I didn't get up to that big. I would find some time to every once in a while kind of go to the gym, maybe lift some weights, but really nothing like the training I had done in the past. And so I remember at one point before I got into triathlon, I was about 185. And currently my race weight is down to 165.
And how tall are you, just for kind of like a visual?
6 foot.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, either way, between 150 and 160, that's pretty lean.
Yeah, try to be.
Yeah.
But, see.
So you get back into it, and you're like, okay, med school, I definitely need to lose some weight. And so did you return to running? Did you return to the weight room? What did you go back to? Because a lot of people will go back to what they know. Yeah.
So I was kind of doing the whole weight room thing for a while, and that was fun. And during that time I had an uncle who was, doing triathlons and some Ironman events and stuff. And during undergrad, he'd be like, oh, you're a runner. You could totally swim and bike. And I was like, no, I'd never swam laps, and I don't have a bike, and I don't have time for this, and I'm going to run. And then as I'm kind of transitioning and going through med school, I run into a guy who is actually my dentist, and he's kind of nicest guy in the world. Absolutely love this guy. But when I first met him, he was cool, but he told me he did Ironmans, like he'd done full Ironmans. And I was like, no way. Like, you're kind of wimpy. Like, there's no way you've done a full Ironman. Like the only people that do full Ironman are like Chuck Norris, like, no way. And he's like, oh yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, if you ever need company for like a training run, like a 10-mile run or something, just let me know. Cause I'm like, how fast could his pace really be? And I ran in the past. So, I could, anything over 10 miles might be tough, but I could just up and run 10 miles. That wouldn't be a problem. And so one day he took me up on the offer, and we went running, and it was kind of fun, to be back in the swing of things and running. And of course the conversation was like, dude, you have a running background. You should do triathlons. And the same thing. I'm like, I don't have a bike. I don't have time. I don't know how to swim. I could run, but whatever. And so as kind of the summer season went on, we'd talk about it. We'd go on these runs, and he's like, hey, I got an extra bike. Do you want to come ride? And I was like, yeah, sure. I got some time on a Saturday. Let's go ride. And this guy is probably 4 inches shorter than me, and I don't know, maybe 30 pounds lighter than me at the time. And so the bike he had, we had to put the seat all the way up, and like didn't fit me at all, but I had no idea. And I didn't have shoes to clip into. And so we swapped the pedal out for just like, the pedals with the cages on them. And I'd go ride 20, 30 miles with him. And it was a lot of fun. I'd never ridden a road bike before. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And so kind of by the end of the summer, after I think we'd ran or biked together maybe half dozen times, he's like, hey, there's an Olympic triathlon coming up. You should do it. And I'm like, no, I'd have to swim. And he's like, don't worry about it. You just get through the swim. There's no problem. Go, you can borrow this bike, this road bike I have. It'll be fine. And then you'll do fine on the run and it'll be fine. And I was like, okay, fine. You kind of, it really wasn't too hard to twist my arm. And so the day of the race comes, and the night before he backs out, something came up. I'm like, oh, great. So he's like, I can't do it, but you can use my bike shoes, you can use my wetsuit and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so I get it from him, and I don't fit in it. Like, I wear a size 12 shoe, and I think he wears like a 9. And our bodies are way different as far as the wetsuit goes and stuff. But, I have no idea because I've never worn any of this stuff before. And so I just kind of squeeze into it, and I'm like, okay, this will be great. And I kind of rode around the driveway for a little bit, trying to figure out how to clip into pedals, into the cleats and had like dismount off of a bike. And I was like, okay, I should be good to go then. And so the swim was in an open water swim in a river. And I went, and I don't remember much of the swim. It definitely wasn't fast looking back. There was no way it could have been fast. But just kind of got myself through it and got on the bike and had no idea about pacing or heart rate or anything, and just kind of rode as fast as I could. And looking back, there were times where I definitely cut people off. Like, I had no bike etiquette. I was terrible. I didn't know any of the rules, and I just was out racing. Like, if I could make it to the bottom of the hill before you do, I can cut in front of you, and then you can't pass me, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And really, I just had no idea. So, I apologize to everybody that was in that race. I was just naive. And then I went and ran and kind of suffered through a 10K after doing everything else. And I ended up winning my age group. And I was like, oh, well, that was pretty cool. That was a lot of fun. It was fun to get those racing fluids going again and kind of get into the zone and feeling. And so I think I want to do this. Let's go down this rabbit hole. Let's see what it is, and let's explore this a little bit more. And I had another friend from high school who was kind of really big into triathlons, and he was living a few states away. And so I was texting him and calling him, and, hey man, what do we do? And he was giving me a lot of pointers. My dentist friend was getting me a lot of pointers, and how to get a bike and all these things. And so it was just kind of down the rabbit hole. And I did go for it.
And it's a deep rabbit hole too. Like, and I was pretty much the same as you. So I got a road bike secondhand from somebody probably like 2 months before. I was a little bit sooner. I was like 2 months before my first race. And then like I had the bike and I rode it a couple times, and I was like, well, like, okay, this is kind of cool with the platform pedals, but I bet you I could go a lot faster if my feet were actually attached to the pedals, because they wouldn't pop off the pedals when I'm trying to pedal really hard. So then I like went and got the clips, and I started clipping in, and then like you said, you show up to the first race and you have like zero etiquette, like you don't know what's going on whatsoever, but you show up and you just have a blast. And now looking back, I'm like, man, like the rabbit hole from that point to the point where I am now is just so deep, and sometimes I feel like it just only gets deeper.
Oh yeah, there's no end in sight, and it's just this black hole of fun and money, and it's just crazy. All your time is gone, but it's a lot of fun.
And so, how have you been balancing some of this time and this training with also at the same time, going through med school, and also at the same time, having a family?
So I've been lucky that I have a wife that gets competition, that gets endurance running. Like I said, she was on the team in Hawaii with me, won many more awards than I did, and was, comparably much faster than I ever was. And so when we moved for my last 2 years of medical school, we moved to Atlanta. And at the time, we moved right, it must have been it was close to Thanksgiving. There happened to be a race, and so a little 5K. So I took my wife, she wanted to go run it. So I said, okay, I'll take the kids and you can go run it. And she found there's a team, like all these ladies were in these jerseys, Atlanta Track Club. And I was like, they're all pretty fast. It looks like a team. You should go talk to them and see if, you can get on the team and stuff. And she had just had our second baby. And so she went and talked to him, and they were really friendly. And she told him, I ran in college and we just moved here and this would be fun. And so they gave her the coach's number. The next day, she had a meeting with the coach, gave her all the times. And the coach says, okay, you can be on our team and here's a bunch of gear. And she's like, wow, this is really cool. And from there, she just kept getting faster and faster until she recently qualified for the Olympic trials in the marathon, and is on their Olympic development team. And so she gets the whole competitiveness and wanting to race with our background. So she's super supportive of that. And so, balancing it, we just kind of look at our schedules the week before and say, when are your big workouts? What do you have to do? Okay. And what do we have to do with the boys? And, what's either of our work schedule? And we just kind of make it work. I don't get outside to ride as much as I would like to. Most of my rides, probably 90% of my rides, are on the indoor trainer starting at about 5 a.m. And so what our typical routine looks like is let's say I have to ride. So I'll wake up at 5 and I'll get a 2-hour ride in from 5 to 7. And then my wife, if she wakes up or the kids start waking up around then, she'll kind of take care of them, get them ready for breakfast and things like that. And then I'll get off the bike. She'll take off sometime during that time to go run because I'm home. So she really takes off and leaves, and I'm still here with the kids. And then I finish getting them ready for school and everything. She comes back, and then I either go study or go to the hospital or go to work or whatever. And she'll have the kids during the day. On my way home from the clinic or the hospital or studying, I will generally go stop, do a swim, and then I'll come home. I cook dinner. And she takes off for work, and then I get the kids ready for bed and everything, and then my night is just studying. And so that's usually how it works. It's kind of like it's definitely team 100%. We're both in making sacrifices for the other one to kind of have this hobby and hang on to our youth for a little bit longer while we raise our kids and go to work and do all the things that we have to.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of planning.
But I mean, that's really cool at the same time because you guys, like you take shifts and I mean, I'm sure, talking about it on a podcast probably might come out a little bit smoother than some days, where it may not be running as much like a well-oiled machine as it sounds like it is. But I mean, it seems like you pretty much have, the schedule and everything figured out. And aside from, maybe that every now and again monkey wrench that gets thrown in, you guys have it balanced out pretty well.
Yeah, if we talk about it and we're able to plan it, we usually get it. I mean, there's times during the summer when the weather's nice and I'll have teammates and friends that are going to go ride and I won't be able to, or she also coaches as well. So she coaches like 50 athletes, and she'll have these requirements where she'll have to go and do a certain run with her athletes. And so, and I'll have a big ride and a brick that I want to do on a Saturday. And so it means that I start my ride at 4 a.m. and she takes off. But when my ride's done after 3 hours or so, I'll take the boys and I will push them in the stroller and do my 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-mile brick, pushing both of my children in our jogging stroller. And so that's not ideal. I would much rather be on the old country roads in Georgia doing that and then, doing a nice brick with my teammates and stuff and not having to worry about all that. And sometimes I'm able to, but most times it seems like there's a wrench. And that's just kind of the sacrifices that we do, is a lot of indoor trainer rides and a lot of stroller pushes.
Yeah. And I think that, and I talked about this on a few podcasts, but I think that when it comes to both this sport and then, obviously the weight loss side of this as well, it has to there has to be some sacrifice involved. Like you're not going to be able to do all of the things that you want to all of the time. And so you're going to have to sacrifice something here or something there. And so like you were saying, being able to go outside, well, you probably can't go outside at 4:00 in the morning, when you have to do a ride. So, that has to be done inside. And, if your wife has something going on and the boys, obviously they're not old enough that they can just kind of take care of themselves for 3 hours. Somebody's going to have to stay with them. So you have to make a sacrifice and do that ride inside. So I think that when it comes to triathlon, there's definitely some sacrifice. And then as you were saying, when it comes to even making food decisions. Like, you have to have some sacrifice there as well. So whether it's, in the cafeteria in college, or when you're out with friends, at happy hour after work, there has to be some sacrifice involved, depending on what your goals are and depending on what you want to be able to do.
Exactly. Sacrifice. And once you've decided what your goals are, what you want to do, and what sacrifices you're willing to make, the key is to be consistent about it. I'm not, I didn't until 3 years ago when I started doing triathlons, I had never swam laps in a pool. I'd never clipped into shoes or anything like that, but it's just consistently going to the pool and consistently being on the bike and consistently not eating after 8, or consistently drinking this much amount of water, or consistently getting my workouts in, that's made the difference. And I think most of triathletes are like that. Most people aren't pros. Most people don't have a sponsor paying for their, a salary, or a chef, or a masseuse, or, take off for a month to go train in these exotic places. But most triathletes can be consistent. And I think that's the biggest key, is just that consistency.
Sidebar, have you ever watched the Netflix series called Eat, Train, Win?
No,
okay.
I actually haven't.
Well, if you're looking for something to watch for the next time you're on the trainer, you should check this out. It's called, I believe that's what it's called. It's called Eat, Train, Win. And it's about a professional cycling team who has their own chef that travels with them through the entire Tour de France. So she has breakfast ready for them when they wake up before they start the stage. And then she leaves the stage when the stage starts. She goes out and shops at local like farmers markets and, grocery places and all these other places, and then circles back around to where the stage finishes and has dinner cooked for them, all in the amount of time that it takes them to do the stage. It's pretty insane.
Wouldn't that be awesome? I think that's everybody's dream. That would just be so cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm super thankful that I have my girlfriend who cooks, has dinner ready for me on long training days, or days where like I trained in the morning and then I come home and I have a podcast, or I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Like, even just having that is amazingly helpful. But I can't imagine what it would be to just have somebody that cooks like every single meal for you, and you don't even have to think. You just sit down and there it is.
And there it is. Yeah. That would be cool. It'd also be cool to be the cook, to travel around with pros all day and to hang out with them and figure out, what you can do to make them faster.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, absolutely. So now your journey into triathlon was kind of like, okay, hey, I'm just going to give this a shot. And you didn't have, much of the equipment. So I'm assuming now that you've gotten a little bit more involved, you have some of your own equipment.
Yeah.
But there are some things that you still, one, you don't use, or don't have, and then there are also some things that you had to overcome. So first, I want to talk about some of the things that you had to overcome. I know that you said you didn't come from a swimming background, but you actually freaked out. No offense, but you had, big time issues with the swim. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I don't know why this didn't happen my first Olympic, or the first race I ever did. It was open water in a river with a current and stuff, but I didn't freak out too bad. I don't remember it a whole lot. I don't know why, but so I did that race in November. I did a sprint in March, and then my next race that I ever did was Ironman 70.3 St. George. And I went into it kind of a little bit hot-headed, I guess, like, oh yeah, I had this college background in running, and here I am, my fitness is getting better, and most of these triathletes, they didn't have that, and so I should be fine. And I was so unprepared for this race. And so I get in the water, and normally St. George is a pretty warm and hot race for an early season race. But this time in 2016, it decided to be freezing cold. A storm blew through. And so the water was it was cold. It was super choppy. And I remember the gun went off, and I had never been surrounded by that many people starting before. and the gun went off, and I just remember putting my face in the water and trying to swim, and I could not breathe. I was panicking. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't figure it out. And I got like 50 yards, and I was like, that's it. I can't do this. I cannot swim this. I can't go any further. For some reason, I can't keep my face in the water. I can't get any breath. Every time I try to breathe, waves are coming over me. I'm done. And the thought went through my head, no, you traveled from Atlanta, Georgia to St. George, Utah. Your family's here. By this time I was on this team. Their teammates are here. You have to finish. You cannot quit. And so I was like, okay. And so literally besides 50 yards of that swim, I swam with my head out of the water. I doggy paddled, I breaststroked, but my head was out of the water the entire time. And so my swim time was something like, 45, 50 minutes, something just, that I was embarrassed about. And so that's what it was. And mind you, I had started swimming. So that race was in May. I had started swimming consistently in January. So I had about 4.5, 5 months of swimming. And for me, a big day, I would swim 3 times a week. And a big swimming day, like if I was really tired and I went hard, was 2,000 yards in an indoor pool. And I thought I was something else, and I didn't have a swim coach. My form was terrible. I just was trying to make it back and forth, wall to wall, without drowning, as fast as I could. I had no idea what drills to do or anything like that. And so when I raced that first 70.3, I, paid for my lack of knowledge and lack of practice, I guess, and also being overwhelmed by just the amount of athletes plus the water conditions. It was just really, really rough.
No, that did not happen in your 70.3 race at the beginning of this season. So what were some of the things that you did between, St. George and then Raleigh, and how did you kind of like overcome that issue?
That's a good question. I think I finished having that problem by the end of my first season racing. And looking back, it was more spending more time in the pool and getting more comfortable with the water, but then also kind of going through mentally and taking control of my mind and just saying, you are totally fine. You just have to swim. You just have to get this past you. Just make it to the next buoy. You're totally fine. Get your breathing under control. Your breathing is fine. Stop freaking out. Next stroke, next stroke, next stroke. You're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And so, for the next couple of races after that first year, or during that first year, it was like a mental pep talk and talking myself off of the cliff for the whole entire swim. And then once, I guess it was just experience. Once that year had passed and I had swam enough in the pool and swam enough in enough races, it really wasn't a problem anymore. Now, leading up to a race, I kind of, I get in the water and don't freak out. You're going to be totally fine. I'm not the fastest swimmer or anything like that, but I just kind of talk myself, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Just breathe, get in your rhythm, get in your stroke. You're not going to drown. Go. And now I just don't have that issue anymore. And I'm really fortunate. Earlier this year, I did Ironman 70.3 Gulf Coast. And during that swim, I got stung like 3 or 4 times by jellyfish. And I think, twice in the face and 1 on each hand. And I think that if, I hadn't learned to kind of talk myself off of that ledge, that could have messed up my race big time. Getting stung in the ocean by a jellyfish with waves and who knows what else is in there really could have messed me up mentally.
Yeah.
But so now, luckily I don't have that problem anymore. It just took a lot of practice and kind of telling myself, get over it, dude. You're going to be fine.
Now, did you increase your time in open water at all?
No, I just increased my time in the pool.
Okay. And my second follow-up question to that was, like, when you were doing the mental, self-talk and kind of talking yourself back from the ledge, and you were kind of just focusing on your swim and just focusing on the current situation and, okay, make it to the next buoy, did you ever start to, like, count your strokes or, find something else to focus on that took your mind off of the swim, so to speak, I guess?
A little bit. I do intermittently count strokes, but it's more of to pass the time and also make sure that I'm I don't know, that my strokes are moving fast enough, that I'm going fast enough. It's kind of a way for me to measure, okay, your stroke count seems pretty good. You must be moving well. So that does kind of occupy my mind. In the past, with these mass starts, you get swum over and people are swimming over the top of you. And I was always the victim of that. And so that definitely didn't help. And that doesn't happen nearly as much anymore. And I probably do it to people more, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't know. It just came with more experience and being more in the moment. That seemed to be what helps the best for me.
And I think that just one more thing to add, which I know that you did write about it in one of your posts. One of the other things that you can do is, you can always take the outside route as well. And so you can always start over off to the far side, because everybody wants to be next to the buoys and everybody wants to try and take that, at that 100% straight line. But if you start just a little bit to the outside and then kind of work your way back in, you're really not going to swim that much extra, but you're going to avoid that washing machine and getting swum over.
Totally. That's a good point. For the while there, the rest of the first year and definitely my second year, that was my strategy in the swim, is because the mass starts and getting swum over was just crazy for me. I couldn't believe it. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just go the outside. And what is it going to add? 40 seconds, a minute to my time total. That's, in the whole 4.5 hours, that's really not going to matter too much. I'd rather do that and not freak out and add a minute to my time than, be in the middle of chaos and kind of panic and start hyperventilating and have a miserable swim. And so, I would just look at the buoy and say, okay, I'm just going to start over here and just swim to the far left and just go and hopefully have some clear water and not have to stress out about getting run over or drowned or anything like that.
Now, talking about time and everything, as far as your races go, as triathletes, it seems as though we are always chasing the next device, the next piece of data, the next, metric to measure our progress. You only train with heart rate.
That is correct.
So you do not have a power meter on your bike.
I do not have a power meter.
Now, do you have a cycling computer or do you only use a watch?
I do not have a cycling computer. I only use a watch.
And that watch only does heart rate?
Only heart rate, yeah. That's the only extra thing that I have. I don't have a cadence or any of that stuff, just heart rate.
So talk to me about that, and talk to me about, I guess, some of the whys, because I know that there are people out there who can become extremely obsessed with data and obsessed with numbers and obsessed with chasing that FTP or that next pace or that speed or that, whatever it may be. But I know that there are also measures that can be very helpful for, measuring progress and as you're racing, tracking your paces and everything. So can you talk to me a little bit about why it is that you race the way that you do?
Totally. The reason I do is called a medical student's budget. To be honest, I just haven't been able to afford any of that stuff. The longer answer is, the time that I was running in high school and college, there wasn't, Garmin really was kind of like this far off thing. No one really had like a watch like that. No one really had heart rate or anything like that. It was just, you had your Timex stopwatch and you just went and ran and that's how you did it. And so that was all I knew as I transitioned into racing triathlons. But, stuff had changed during that time that I was completely oblivious and naive to. And so that first 70.3, for example, I had no idea about nutrition. I had no idea about heart rate. I had no idea about power or anything like that. So I literally did that first Ironman St. George without eating anything. And I had no idea that I should be eating calories. And I pushed that bike ride so hard, and going up Snow Canyon was the most miserable thing in the world because I hit the wall and bonked big time. And then trying to run after that was just a shuffle. And then afterwards people were like, oh yeah, well, what did you eat? And I was like, water. And then they started handing me these pretzels during the run, but that was it. I had no idea. And so as going down the rabbit hole, I started to learn there's such things as power meters, and you should get an FTP test and do these watts. And oh yeah, you got to watch your calories, and this is your heart rate and stuff. So anyway, but during all this time, I'm a medical student with 2 kids and, a wife and all these other responsibilities. And so I was basically on bare bones budget. And so everything until last year, everything that I had ever owned as far as triathlon goes, besides my socks and shoes, were used. My bike was used. My bike shoes were used. My helmet was used. Like everything I got just from like online swap meet on Facebook and Craigslist and stuff like that. And I got what I really couldn't afford any of it, but I got the best that I could. And then in 2017, my wife for my birthday got me a Garmin watch. Before that, I was using just like a Pebble, I guess is what it was called. It really didn't give me any data. And so I got a Garmin and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. And so now and I had a heart rate monitor. And so now I could track my heart rate and kind of use that as a metric and stuff. And so as I progressed, things still like power meters and stuff have just still been out of the budget. And so I do the best that I can right now, until I start, getting a paycheck someday. And so, I don't have a power meter. Well, I don't have a fancy trainer. I just have a fluid trainer that I use inside my house and just kind of bare bones. And so what I've been able to do is kind of say, okay, on the swim, whatever, just try to get through it, count my strokes, see if I can go latch, behind someone's feet and follow their bubbles and see if I can go. On the bike, I try to maintain in a certain heart rate zone and try not to blow up. And on the run, I just kind of look down, at my pace and make sure my mile splits are what I'd like them to be. And that's about as scientific as my racing goes. I don't have a computer on my bike. I have teammates that, have this computer and plug in best bike split and it tells them what their power needs to be at every moment of the course. And I'm just like, how is that not cheating? That is so awesome. Like your bike tells you need to be at this power and you'll get this time. Like, are you kidding me? And so secretly I'm envious and jealous and everything like that, but that's just all been out of the budget. And so I race with what I can. So,
and mind you, now for the audience, we need to set this up, but you have managed to qualify for your pro card without using any of this data. So for those of you out there who think that just because, Andy Potts or Tim O'Donnell or Lionel Sanders or whoever, is using all this data. I mean, yes, it's great what Lionel Sanders is doing and putting out all of his data, and you can see exactly what watts he's holding, for X amount of time and this and that. But you also have to remember, like, that guy's getting that trainer for free. And you have managed to qualify and accept your pro card using none of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't need it.
You don't need it. I mean, I definitely wouldn't turn it down, and it's something I definitely want to get. It's on the list of things that I would love to have. There's so many gadgets that would just be awesome to have, and if you've got it, great. But don't let it hold you back. Really kind of what it comes down to, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is just being consistent. And if you're consistent in your training, that'll carry over to your racing and you'll be fine. You might not qualify for your pro card. And, a lot of times it doesn't matter who you are. The stars just have to align and you've got to be able to randomly to get those 3 disciplines to happen to come together perfectly during a day. And maybe some people show up and maybe some people don't show up and someone else has a bad race. Who knows? But the more consistent you are with your training, the more that will carry over into racing. And so, yeah, all those gadgets are awesome and they're fun, but they're not necessary. I'm living proof of that, I suppose.
Yeah. And so the last thing that I kind of wanted to chat with you about is the decision to take your pro card, because this whole thing is new to me. Obviously, I have no aspirations of qualifying for a pro card, but I've had Jeremy Riley on the podcast, who is also racing this season for the first time as a professional. And so he has kind of explained this to me. And, when you qualify for your pro card, it's actually good for 3 years. And so we actually I posted it yesterday, but we just did a recap of him racing as a professional for the first season. and he's looking at this as a 3-year journey. So talk to me about your decision to take a pro card and kind of where you want this to go.
Yeah. So going into after my first year of triathlon, I don't know, just by how competitive I am and how competitive I am growing up. And to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I get beat by the best. It's that I got to compete against the best. And just my whole life, if I didn't get to go and play against or compete against people that were better or were really good, that really bothered me. And it didn't matter if I got my butt kicked. I just kind of learned and tried to figure out a new way to beat them and would just go back and do it again. And so I kind of knew that for endurance sports, if you're going to be consistent and dedicated and, you've got some fitness, it takes about 2 years of high competitive training and racing in order to qualify for an elite or pro event. It doesn't matter if it's running or swimming or triathlon or whatever. It's at least 2 years of high level, high intensity training and racing. And so going into this season, I knew it was kind of a far-fetched goal that, hey, it's, this will be, 2 years of intense training, because my first year was just kind of figuring stuff out. So this will be your second year. You could potentially do it. And so that was always in the background. It wasn't something that if I finished this 2018 season and I hadn't qualified for my pro card, then it was done. I was never doing triathlon or never racing again, or my goals weren't met or anything like that. It was like, you could do it if you're consistent, and it's a good goal to have going into it. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind at the beginning of this season. And so it just so happened that at Raleigh, I happened to qualify for my pro card, which was awesome. Now, and I was kind of on cloud nine, when it hits you and you're like, oh, I really placed this high, and there were this pros, and oh, I met this criteria, and awesome, that's great. And going into the race, I just wanted to win my age group, possibly win overall, and have a good solid race. And then if something great like a pro card came out of it, then that would be cool too. But that goal was further down on the list. And so when kind of all these goals were kind of falling into place after Raleigh, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And so, when I finished, because of the Ironman tracker, a bunch of friends back home were texting, you did it, you qualified, we know why. Justin Mendoza was actually one of them. He was messaging me like crazy, like, you did it. And I was so naive, I didn't even know under what qualification I did. So I had to look up the rules just to make sure and say, okay, yeah, it's true, I did do it. And so I was kind of on cloud nine, getting a lot of people saying, the way to go, that's great. And my wife was happy. And it was almost like justification, I guess, for all the time that I've spent training. And so on the drive home, I had to start thinking, okay, is this something I want to do? And the knee-jerk reaction is, yeah, do it. But at the same time, that meant, okay, because of the time allotment that you have, the financial constrictions you have, your family, your wife, your career that you've decided to do, I'm probably not going to be one of the top dogs in triathlon. Therefore, I probably won't qualify for Kona. Therefore, I probably wouldn't qualify for 70.3 Worlds either. And I had raced 70.3 Worlds the year before, and it was a lot of fun. It was just a great environment, and the race was great. And so I kind of had to think about that and say, okay, wait a minute. You love that race, and this is a 3-year commitment. And, right now I have zero desire to do a full Ironman. Just time constraints and stuff just wouldn't work. But I was like, if that happened in the future, or at least in the next 3 years, that's probably out the window. And the same with Worlds. And so it was like a long drive home from Raleigh to Atlanta where I was thinking, okay, is this what I really want to do? And so that next week, I kind of spent some time thinking, do you want to take the pro card and really get the snot beat out of you every single race? Or do you want to just stay, elite amateur and go to Worlds and still have tons of fun? You still get a race at a high level, and maybe win races and finish overall in first place and stuff. And kind of what it came down to after kind of doing a pros and cons list in my mind and thinking about what I really wanted to do was a few things. My wife, had qualified for the Olympic trials. And so, with her team, she is a professional elite athlete. She gets the special bottles. She gets all of her travel and all of her, housing and meals and all that covered and paid for. And she gets massages paid for and so much gear. It's just nuts. And so to kind of I guess you'd call it my man card, to kind of pull out my man card and say, it's not just my wife, but it's me as well. That would be really cool. Not that I have to trump my wife or do anything higher than my wife, but just to kind of be at that level as her would be really, really cool. At the same time, the thought came into me is, when your kids are older and they have their friends over to say, oh yeah, my mom and dad were both pro athletes, or to tell our kids, we were professional athletes. That would be really cool. Just kind of like posterity's sake, and your grandkids find out about that. That to me, that's really cool. And then my friend he texted me and he was like, what's that NCAA saying? 99% of us go pro in something other than sports. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I could be the 1%. That's kind of funny. And so I thought about that. And then, like I said, my med school budget, I don't have a lot of these cool gadgets and gizmos and stuff. And so I thought it could lead to an opportunity to maybe get some sponsorships and maybe, accumulate a power meter or a computer, or a wetsuit or things like that. And so that kind of went through my mind as, okay, this is an opportunity to possibly fund my hobby that I have, and to help with costs for my hobby, because I knew I wasn't going to be a full-time pro. It's a hobby. And I also wanted to race against the best out there. The thought of my next race is Augusta here this weekend, and Tim O'Donnell's there. And, we're going to be lining up at the swim start, and I'm going to be next to Tim O'Donnell, and that's just going to be nuts. And he's probably going to clean my clock. But to be able to say that I raced him and to give it my all against athletes of that caliber, not starting a half an hour or an hour behind them, but, and maybe seeing them on the run, but to actually see what I can do against them is what I live for as far as competition goes. I'll probably be the pro that walks around to the other guys and girls and with a pen and says, hey, can I have your autograph? And I'm like, you're a pro. What are you thinking? But I'm no shame. I watch you guys on YouTube on my trainer, I just watched your race at Kona. That's so cool. Can I have your autograph? And so that's totally I know where I stand. And the last thing that kind of made me want to do it and accept the pro card was I almost felt like it was a duty. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of triathletes who wake up early, who financially sacrifice to do this sport and this hobby and balance life with their kids and work, and maybe don't have the athletic background that I have, that literally would give their two front teeth in order to have a race that fast or to be able to say they're a pro. And to me, to earn that right, and then to just kind of turn it down because I wanted more glory of winning first place overall amateur, almost felt disrespectful to all the other thousands of triathletes that were out there. And so I almost felt like it was my duty. These people would, they give anything to be at the position I am, and how dare you take it for granted. And so after about a week of kind of mulling that over and saying, are those things good enough to justify, probably not going to Kona and things. And I decided, this is a hobby for me. I want to compete against the best when I start residency and stuff. Who knows what my fitness will turn into. And so now's the chance, and I don't want to let it slip away. And so that's why I ended up accepting my pro card. So Augusta this next weekend will be my pro debut. So we'll see how that goes.
And I didn't even know that Augusta had a professional field. So that's really cool that it's so close to home. But that's got to be super exciting here, Tuesday, Wednesday, just before your first pro race. I mean, you got to be maybe a little nervous and maybe a little excited and kind of everything in between as well.
Exactly. I'm trying not to stress about it too much. I mean, people over their Facebook group are posting pictures of alligators in the water. And I'm just like, guys, come on, I got to race these guys, and there's gators in this water. This is going to be nuts. But I'm really excited at the same time. Just go out and race, to tell you the truth. I haven't raced a long course in 3 months. And so I'm excited to just go out and race and start with the big guys that are fast and try not to finish last in the pro field and just have a killer time and a fun race. And that's really what it's coming up this weekend. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. Well, I will absolutely be on my tracker and keeping an eye out for you and seeing what's going on with that. So,
sweet.
Well, I want to just say, thank you so much again for coming on this evening. I really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you for sharing your story and being open about some of the challenges that you face, specifically with the swim, because I know that that's something that people are really going to be able to kind of take something away from, even just in knowing that there are other people out there that that go through this, and it is possible to kind of just take a breath and calm down, and you did the training, and you are more than capable of completing this. So I want to say thank you for being open and sharing that with the listeners.
Oh, of course. I'm an open book, man. I'm the everyman pro, I guess. Like, I'm just like your neighbor. I have the same fears and the same time restraints and the same budget constraints, and anyone can ask me any questions. I have nothing to hide. All my workouts are on Strava, and it's a hobby for me, and it's something I enjoy doing, and I think it's that way for most people. And so I'd love to sharing my experiences and the things that I've learned. That's not a problem at all.
Maybe even more of a budget constraint than some people have, being a med student right
Yeah.
now and
Yep.
having 2 kids and a family.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much again, and I look forward to tracking you and getting reconnected, and finding out kind of how this first season, I guess really season and a half, will go, because I want to hear about a full year as racing, with your professional license.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have to touch base again soon. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. All right. Well, you have a great evening, and I will talk with you soon.
Sounds good.
All right, my friends, what did you think? How did that one sit with you? If you could, do me a favor, please go on to the socials and show Brandon some love. At the time of this recording, Brandon has just completed his first race as a professional triathlete, and it would be awesome if you, as a listener of the Do It For Yourself podcast, could go over and just show him some love for completing that first race as a professional. I would really appreciate that, and I know that he would as well. And as always, you can reach out to me and let me know what you thought of this episode. If you would like to support the Do It For Yourself podcast, the first and biggest way that you could help me would be to share this podcast with a friend. Share it with somebody who you think would be interested in listening to the Do It For Yourself podcast and listening to some of these stories of some of these amazing individuals that I've had the opportunity and the privilege to sit down and talk with. That is one of the biggest ways that you can help me out. Another way is you could take just few minutes and go on to your podcast host of choice, whether it be the Apple Podcast or Stitcher, Google Play, wherever it is that you find your podcasts, and hit that subscribe button for me. Subscribe to the show so that you can catch up on some of the guests that I've already had and some of the amazing guests that I will be having coming up on this show. And while you are there, if you have the time, please leave me a nice little review, do the star rating, 1 star, 5 stars. I need your honest opinion on how you think this show is going. The last place that you can support my work is on patreon.com. It's patreon.com/do-it-for-yourself. It's very easy to find. There's a link in the show notes as well. And that is just an easy way for you to monetarily support the podcast each month. So I want to thank you all so much for tuning in to the show this week, and I am looking forward to sharing another interview with you next week.